Okay, the recording is in progress, so we can begin. So this is the third shiur in Hilchos Taruvos. So it says over here on the bottom, and as it is on the syllabus, that we're starting Siman Tzadik Tes, and that is correct. Bezos Hashem will do Aleph through Dalet, but we still have a bit left from Tzadik Ches. We began Sif Ches and we learned the Mechaber, but we did not learn the Ramah. So we're going to go back now to learn the Ramah, and we will do Sif Tes, and then we'll go to Siman Tzadik Tes. Just as far as the Seder Hayom, I'll mention again, if somebody reminds me at the end of the shiur, because we might have some more people that are going to come on. Since next week is Hanukkah, so you'll notice on the syllabus that was sent out that there's no shiur next week, so it's a good time for a Chazara. And yeah. Fine, so let us proceed. So what we were talking about in Tzadik Ches, Sif Tes, was actually the previous Sifim were speaking about things that don't need Shishim, exceptions to the rule. So we said in Sif Zayin that an egg you need 61, and we had the two reasons given, the Rambam, the Ramban. Is it because eggs don't all have the same size, and therefore you have to leave a little bit of wiggle room, so to speak, or it's because of Chivas that it's a berry, like the Rambam says. In any case, so we need 61 instead of 60. And then we learned the Sif Ches, I guess for the sake of clarity, since we did it last week, a Chal, the udder of a cow, was also an exception to the rule that you only need 59 instead of 60, because the Chal is mitzdarif to be mavatul the Chalav Midarabanan, the Chalav Mesa that's inside over there. So the Chal itself is mitzdarif. If you cook it in a pot of basar, it's mitzdarif. It counts on the basar side of things, and therefore you only need 59 times instead of 60. We'll be getting in this second part of today's shiur and some Tzadik Tes. Also, what can you be mitzdarif to be mavatul something? But those are the exceptions to the rule. And now this Ramah is related to this issue of Bittul B'Shishim, but it's a whole topic for itself, this Ramah, with very extensive application in Halacha L'Maisa. So let's jump in. Ramah says, Kol Isurim, Haneigim B'Zman Hazeh, all of the prohibitions that we have today, Kulam Mizbatlim B'Shishim, all of them are nullified in 60. Milvad Chametz B'Pesach V'Yayin Nesach. And the exception is Chametz B'Pesach is a Isser Mashahu on Pesach, and Yayin Nesach, non-kosher wine, is also Isser Mashahu. All discussion with the Raisim and the Rabbanah, there's Yayin Stam Yainam, and Yayin Nesach Mamish, which is the Raisim and the Rabbanah. Kashin is bar be'el chasein. So you'll go look in Hilchos Pesach, you'll see the din of bittul by Pechametz, and you'll look in the dinim of Yayin Nesach, you'll see all the dinim of Yayin. So Shach points out over here that you look in the Torah, so he gives another couple examples. He talks about Truma and Orla. When he says Ein Lano Asek Bahem, says the Torah. So we're not busy with that. So the shaila is, it doesn't apply today. Is that what I mean? It's not. It's not in these halachas. And if it's not in these halachas, so why is he talking about chametz and yayin also not in these halachas? In any case, we do have the din of truma today. You have in Eretz Yisrael and the Rabbanim, but certainly chala has the din of truma, Rosh's chala. And this is a very common question. Somehow somebody was mafresh challah, separated the challah, and guess where that piece ended up? You ask around, Yankee, did you see the piece of challah? You see that little piece that I put on the side over here? And with the guilty look on his face, he threw it back into the bowl, and it all got kneaded together. Now what do you do? Anyway, it's really what you do lemaisa is mater neder, but and you're mafresh again from scratch. That's besides the point. We have dinim of bittul. By truma is bottled b'meya 100 times, and then you have by orla is bottled b'masayim is 200 times. So orla, kilaya kerem, different things which you do have today. And even now, some want to say that we're only talking about what's in chutz la'aretz, but orla is also the din of orla. We're neg orla in chutz la'aretz. The shaila is it's only if it's orla vada, if it's safek orla. So if it's in Eretz Yisrael, you have to be machmer. But we know that safek orla b'chutz la'aretz is mutter, which is why you can go to the fruit store and you don't have to check and go apple picking. And as long as it's the safek that the tree is, whether the fruit is orla or not, so then you're allowed to pick from the tree. Because safek orla b'chutz la'aretz is mutter, but we do have a din of orla. If you knew for sure it was orla, so then we have also another din of a bit. So why the Ramah doesn't mention it, all discussion in Shach, but Lamaisa, Shach gives a few explanations why you might not want to talk about it, but there is a din of bittul by other things as well. Shame. But now let's talk about the regular cases. Regular cases, everything is batul b'shishim. But as you get accustomed to when you learn Shulchan Aruch, everything, but there's always exceptions to the rule. But we're going to have 3 simanim, we're going to have kuf aleph, kuf base, things that are not afilu belef labatul. Okay, but those are special cases. Different dinner. Okay, but let's say something which is none of the above. Okay, is there always batul b'shishim? So just to go back a second, and we're going to be speaking about it soon. This whole concept of batul b'shishim, where do we learn it from? So the Gemara has a whole discussion of shishim. Do you learn from El Nazir? Whole discussion with the shishim, or is that just normally foods are batul b'shishim? You have milk and meat; both of them have taste, but they don't have a tremendously strong taste. So and the chacham are mashayim b'shishim. But the real isser is tam, but we're just mashayim b'shishim. That's what we had a whole discussion at the beginning of the siman. According to the Machaber, you give it to a kvela arma, you give it to or the kvela, anytime a goy mesiach lefitumah, you give it to him to taste, because the main thing is taste, according to the Machaber. And the Rama says we don't rely on a goy mesiach lefitumah, you have to be mashayim b'shishim. And even the Machaber, it's min b'mina, things have the same taste, it's not going to do any good to give it to a goy to taste. So that also the Machaber also says we go by shishim. But the shaila is, let's say you have shishim, but it has taste. So that, if you recall, way back when, that was Shittas Rashi. The Rashi said this whole idea of a goy tasting it is only after you have shishim. Okay, but if you don't even have shishim, says Rashi, if the goy doesn't taste, it doesn't do you any good. The goy is an extra precaution you put on top of the shishim. So if you have less than shishim, there's no point in asking him. If once you have shishim, then is when you ask the goy, according to Rashi. Fine. Now, if all foods are batul b'shishim, like the Ramah seems to be saying over here, so when does it become negeya? So when it becomes negeya is when you have things that have a stronger than average taste. Okay? So Ramah says, when do we say it's batul b'shishim? Is when the prohibition did not give any taste into the pot, into the final mixture. But if the iser did give taste into this pot, and it's an iser mitzad atzmei. We'll come back to what that phrase means in a second. Afilu be'elef le'batul. Then it's not batul even if you have 1,000 times more. Kol zman shemargishim taimei, as long as you're able to still sense its taste. Okay, what does it mean? Iser machmas atzmei. So we'll soon have a picture over here of, but the classic example. Salt is something which obviously is going to be detectable in less than shishim. Salt has a very strong taste. Now, let's say you have salt that became aser because it absorbed blood. It absorbed dam. So now the salt becomes aser. And now this bloody salt fell into a pot. So now, does it taste like salt? Yes, it tastes like salt. So do we say afilu be'elef le'batul? So The fact is that it's not an Isser Machmas Atzmi. That we had this concept earlier in Bas B'Cholov, that we have a concept of Isser Bolua, that you have a prohibition, not that the thing itself is prohibited, because it absorbed something else. So it'll be relevant today also, so might as well do a little chazara, that we had a machlekes machaber amma legabe chticha nas and nevela, that when you have some milk that got absorbed, for example, in a piece of meat, so if you say you have a 2-ounce piece of meat with 1 ounce of milk falls in, so then we say it's 3 ounces of a new Isser Bas B'Cholov, because it's a cheticha nas and nevela. Let's say you had some chaylev that fell into some kosher meat, the same proportion. So according to the Machaber, we say you only need shishim against the 1 ounce of chaylev that fell in, because he doesn't say cheticha nas nevela b'shar isurim. He says it only with Bas B'Cholov. And the Ramah says, as a klal, we say cheticha nas nevela with Bas B'Cholov for sure, and we even say cheticha nas nevela b'shar isurim. So if 1 ounce of chaylev, forbidden fat, fell into 2 ounces of kosher meat, and this piece fell into a pot, you're going to need 60 times 3, because even the kosher meat became like nevela, because of cheticha nas and nevela. So therefore, you're going to need 180 zaysim in order to be mavakel. One of the exceptions, just as we're going over Chazara, that one of the exceptions to the rule, the Ramah brings down lach balach, that if it's liquids, so then we can be mekel in the case of hefsed meruba. Okay, so that's in general the din of nas and nevel, and that's we have the concept of the Isser Belua. So according to Machaber, you had this piece of meat you can't eat because it absorbed chaylev. So that's the Isser Belua. Over here, the salt is the Isser Belua. The salt absorbed. You have bloody salt. I think he has the picture here. 1 second. I'm going to get ahead of myself a little bit, so I'm going to put some things on the screen we're not going to do. But let's just get to the bloody salt. We'll leave the garlic. Yeah, on the left, you see some bloody salt. Now, if that salt falls in, even if it's less than shishim, you're going to taste salt. Okay, but the salt is not an Isser Machmas Atzmi. Isser Mitzar Atzmi, or if you want to, different phrases are saying the same thing. The salt is not Asr, the blood is Asr. Blood is Asr b'shishim. The salt became Asr because of the blood. Okay, but nevertheless, the blood does not have the power within itself to prohibit more than 60 times itself. So if it's 1 ounce of blood fell into 2 ounces of salt, so then you're going to need 60 times 1 in order to be mavat. When is it going to be Isser Machmas Atzmi? Let's say the salt was Asr. Hey, somebody bowed down to the salt. So Veda Zara is not both. So then it's Isser Machmas Atzmi. Veda Zara is also b'mashahu. Let's say Machmas Neder, it's something else. The emesis. Okay, I might as well mention it. That you have in Hilchos Shabbos, what happens if salt was cooked in Shabbos? It's all shaklavataria. What is the status of salt? But let's say the pot was sitting on the fire and you put in salt and the salt was never cooked before. Okay, so then the salt gets cooked. So the salt itself is also, it was cooked on Shabbos. Okay, the Shaila, can we import the dinim from Hilchos Shabbos to here? Is a whole discussion achareinim, whether we can use the klalim over there that are discussed. Many of the poskim do derive. Others say that it's not the same thing over there. The knas, different stuff. But in any case, that's an example of when salt would be Isser Machmas Atzmi. And then we say afilu b'elef le'batel, as long as kol zman shemargishim taimei. So in this case over here, of the bloody salt falling in, so then the blood is the salt is not Isser Machmas Atzmi. Okay, fine. V'lochen melech v'tavlin, and therefore the Ramah says salt and spices, midvarim davidu l'taima, which are things which are made to add taste. So surim machmas atzman. So if they themselves are asr, it's not just the isur belua, meaning it's not just that it absorbed the taste of something. There's no bitul b'shishim on these things because you taste them. So if you learn that the pshat bitul b'shishim, that the main isur is that of tam, that the problem of taste. So it's obvious. If you can taste it, so what's up pshat? It's bottle. It's not bottle. If you can taste it, it's not bottle. So that's the din of milsa davidu l'taim. That's what this Ramah is about. Something which was made to give taste. And this is a very, very important din today, especially in I mean, even then, so you had with tavlin, you had with things with strong taste, but now that you have the flavor industry, so it's much more pronounced. So you have, just to give a simple example, you have artificial sweeteners. Yeah. So let's say you have a can of soda, and the can of soda has sugar in it. It's a regular Coke, and it has, I don't know how many calories. Anybody know how many calories in a can of Coke? Whatever, certain amount of calories. Main thing is there from the sugar. Then you have Diet Coke, and let's say they're putting aspartame in it for argument's sake. They're putting aspartame in it, it's artificial sweetener, so it has 0 calories. So a tiny fraction of a calorie. Yeah. Why is that? Aspartame has less calories than sugar? No, aspartame has the exact same number of calories as sugar. Teaspoon for teaspoon, aspartame and sugar have the same number of calories. But the difference is that aspartame is 600 times sweeter than sugar. So all you need to get 1 teaspoon's worth of sweetness, you need 1/600th of a teaspoon. So that's why it has no calories, because it's 1/600 of the amount. And so you have to use hardly anything of it. There's another substance over here. So I wanted to review, get exact the amounts. I have it called tannin. Tannin, it's very interesting. It's a naturally occurring substance. It's a root. And it's 8,000 times sweeter than sugar. 8,000 times. Even aspartame is only 600 times sweeter than sugar. Okay, so we're dealing with things that have tremendous hashpah. Tam. I was once in a factory. They were making horseradish. And there came the time they're putting in the natural flavor. So the natural flavor was natural mustard flavor, and you needed. It was a plastic schissel like this big, about this high, and it's skull and crossbones on it because it was so volatile. You had to have special goggles when you opened it up, and that was like for tens of thousands of jars of horseradish. The horseradish, I tasted the horseradish. Had mamish, now it tastes like turnips. Mamish, no time whatsoever, no sharpness whatsoever. And this was a natural flavor as they extracted. I asked him, why use mustard instead of horseradish? He says the mustard is cheaper and the people can't tell the difference. People are just getting the flavor because you open up the horseradish and you get whiplash, from the strength of the smell. Anyway, but these are extremely powerful agents. So you have a double a bit of timer. So if these things are usher, so then it can make a tremendous difficulty. Okay, so here. So Taz, he points out, as we mentioned before, that there are other things. The Rama is only talking about common cases, so these things are not so common by us. Fine. Now, what happens? You have garlic. Okay, we'll say it's very strong garlic. Okay, so you have some garlic. Let's say the garlic was aser. So here in Eretz Yisrael, you had in Shemitah, you have svichen. Svichen is Issa D'Rabbanan. The same thing applies. Shach brings down is also which things which are only Issa D'Rabbanan. The same thing applies. So svichen, things that grow without you having tended to them, if it just grew by itself, is also in many cases svichen also bachila. You're not allowed to eat it. It's Issa D'Rabbanan. So the svichen, you had the garlic and it fell into the kedera. Now what? So it fell into the Gedera. So now you have a problem. It's less than shishim, but it has a strong taste. So it has a strong taste. So that's the example of tavlin. That's a isumach masatzmi. Okay. So kol eid margishim tam hashum, that as long as you taste the shum is the garlic, hatav shalaser. So it's going to be prohibited because you have the tamisar, even though it's less than shishim. That's a milsad devil latime. Mashain can over here, the case we have the salt that absorbed dam, so that's not a isamach masatzme. Okay, you only need shishim against the blood, not against the salt, because the blood does not have a strong taste. So the melech does have a strong taste. If the melech was also mach masatzme, so then you'd have a problem. But otherwise, you don't really have this problem. Clear? So far, so good. Wait a second. Yeah, I had my speakers turned off so you don't get an echo. Yeah, so far so good. Rabbi, so we're doing okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So that's the basic din of the Ramah, but like everything else, it's not so simple. It's not so simple. So the examples that the Ramah brought over here were melech v'tavlin. Melech v'tavlin. Okay, what would be if it was something that didn't have such a strong taste, but nevertheless you taste it? What's going to be in such a case? So the Taz discusses a case of fat that fell in. Let's say shuman shel iser. Okay, so you have over here, I don't know why it shows shuman shel iser or chalif, whatever the case is. You have some fat. You have if shuman came from a nevela, whatever the case is. So you have some fat. Fat is not tavlin. It has a taste. And let's say the shuman fell inside. And it dissolved, it's gone now, you can't take it out. Melted into the tavshil. And the person, it's less than shishim. But you taste it. So what's the din? So the Taz has a whole discussion. How did you end up tasting it? How are you allowed to eat it to see whether there's taste in it? A whole discussion. How it is we know that this thing has the taste. Do we have to assume? Do we have to double check to make sure that it doesn't have any taste? You have shishim. You have to worry about it. Anyway, that's one of the solutions the Taz brings. That it was shishim, so you thought it was okay. And then you taste it and you say, wait a second, I taste like the fat fell in over here. So the shaila is, the shuman is avidul l'taima, like what exactly is going on over here? Do we have to answer it? Do we not answer it? So the Taz goes back, he tries to bring a raya from Hilchos Yom Tov about a beya shenolda b'Yom Tov. The whole Masechta beya, yeah? So it's a davar sheish l'matir, and it's not bottled. What happens if there's taste? A whole discussion what's with this egg, and he goes back and forth, and excuse me a second. Yeah. So the Taz comes to the conclusion as follows, and he bases this on Issa v'Eter. The end the Taz says that it's dafke melech v'tavlin, which have a strong taste. But a davar she'eina nirgash time b'beifan chazak. But if it's something that doesn't have a strong taste, you don't feel it in a pronounced manner like you would salt or garlic or something like that, so like things which are sharp, they're batul b'shishim. So the Taz concludes that bitul b'shishim works even if you're margish the tam. Even if you're margish the tam. So, in case you want to find out what the Alter Rebbe holds about these things, so I showed you a few Sfarim last week where they collect these things. But in a case like this, it's pretty obvious because the Taz is discussing something Hilchos Yom Tov. So you have a lot of Hilchos Taruvos in Hilchos Yom Tov, all different sorts of cases. And you can look up this din. And the Eiveshter helft, and you have a whole Kuntres Achron from the Alter Rebbe, and Siman Tov Kuf Yud Gimel, Kuntres Achron Daler, if I'm not mistaken, all Kuntres Achron. And not only does the Alter Rebbe speak about this din, the Alter Rebbe speaks about this Taz. And I have to tell you, looked in different Sfarim and Forshim on the Taz, the Alter Rebbe, until you read the Alter Rebbe's Kuntres Achron, Alter Rebbe B'chal disagrees with the Taz. Pri Chodesh disagrees with the Taz, and Alter Rebbe personally Pri Chodesh, if you taste it, it's awesome. Because he doesn't hold from this Taz. But after reading the Alter Rebbe, we didn't even properly understand the Taz 100% until you learn the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe says im nirgesh tame isra fila hargoshas tam kala kol tafshel aser. That's like the Pri Chodesh. And he brings different rayas at Kedarka B'Kedesh. The Alter Rebbe brings down all the all those that discuss this inyan and brings from all over different makedes and concludes that the halacha is like the Pri Chodesh, who disagrees with the Taz, and it says it doesn't matter if it's a strong taste or a weak taste. If you can taste it, it's awesome. That's the conclusion of the Alter Rebbe. Now, interesting thing he adds, he also brings down that the Rambam in Pirush Mishnayos. I forget whether it's an Orla Kilayim. I think it's in Pirush Mishnayos and Orla, if I'm not mistaken. And just Agav, if you're looking for some Mishnayos to learn that's going to help you over here, you have a lot of din in the Vis of Heter and Masechta Orla. It's not just about Orla. You have din of Taruvos there, especially one Perek. In any case, so the Rambam Pirush Mishnayos brings an example of Shemen Shalisser, for the concept of Milsa de Vidlatime. So anyway, the Alter Rebbe paskins like that, and he also brings a diuk in the Taz, and he points out that this whole heter from the Taz is only fulfilled by accident. So it's by Shuman Shenofal, the Taz says. So the Alter Rebbe says that even this heter from the Taz is only going to be if it fell in by accident. If somebody put it in on purpose, so then even the Taz wouldn't allow it. So Lamaisa, it doesn't matter too much to us because we don't pass like the Taz, but it's just interesting, Pasha, learning Pshat in the Taz. Alter Rebbe points out, he says, unless you say that, the whole Taz doesn't make sense. You say, oh yeah, the Taka does make sense. Unless you learn that Pshat. Anyway, you can learn the Kuntra Sachar, very Geshmake Inyan over here. Okay. So just to point out something, if you have your Shulchan Aruch in front of you, so you can see it, a very short Shach Chof Tes. He brings down a field of Elef Labaton. So he brings down from the Issa Beheter that it's only Midrabon. A Misla David Lataima, let's say even it's Tavlin or Melach or something like that, where Issa Macham Satzme, that we say that it's not bottle as long as you can taste it. So the Shach says that's only Midrabon. And right over there, you see there's a order percentage to Rabbi Kiva Eger. And the Rabbi Kiva says, my high, the Ran says it's Midiraisa. So Tam Ke'eka Diraisa goes down to this level too. Even if you have Shishim, and it's because of the strength of the particular thing, we're dealing with the Inyam Midiraisa, not Inyam Midirabon. Yeah, the Shach wants to learn that it's the Rabbanan, and you have Shishim, so maybe you can in such a case give it to a Nachri to taste. Prima Godam has all discussion about the reasons, the different Sirufim, why this might be different, because normally when we say, according to the Ramah, we pass like the Ramah, that we don't rely on giving Nachri Masiyach Lefitum Meitere. But nevertheless, he is matter under certain conditions. Okay, next case. So if you recall from way back when, Siman Pei Zayin, we had a concept called Zevazagadim. What Zevazagadim? That you have two things which are joining together to produce a joint effect. And one of them is permitted and one isn't prohibited. Over there, we learned at the end of Siman Pei Zayin, Lagaba Keva. So you had Keva Shel Iser and Keva Shel Heter in order to make cheese. So you have rennet, which is not kosher, and rennet, which is kosher, and put both of them together. So the Ramah says, if it's ever Zagadim, it's allowed. In general, this is a heter, b'diavad, not a lechatchila. But the Ramah doesn't put any conditions on it. Both the Shach and the Taz, so that's only if the Issa by itself wouldn't be able to do the job. If the Issa by itself would be able to do the job, in other words, it could make the cheese just with the non-kosher rennet. So then what does help Zevaz Hagadim? It's just a piggybacking, like a good phrase over here, onto the chazir, onto the non-kosher rennet, and it's not really going to create a heter. It's only in the case where the non-kosher needs the kosher in order to achieve the final effect. In other words, just the non-kosher rennet by itself wouldn't make the cheese. Non-kosher rennet, only once you add kosher rennet, that'll make the cheese. So then we have b'diavad heter zevaz hagadim. That's what we learned back over there in Siman Pei Zayin Hilchos possible chol. So now let's take this concept and put it over here. Let's say you have some garlic which is not kosher. Let's say it's from Shvis, Shemitah garlic, Svichim. which is on the left. That's why it's red, I guess, because it's aser. And then you have some regular garlic, which is fine. And it falls into the pot. And altogether now it tastes like garlic. So now what's the story? And it's also what happens if they fell in both at the same time into the pot. What would be if you mix together the garlic outside the pot? Do we have any nas in the veil over here that the whole thing got mixed together? What's the story over here with Zev Zagate? Okay. So ma'adin im tivulus atavshel b'tavin shechelk iser v'chelka heter. Yeah, b'mikdash atavlin is a lavada and yochel lias mortgage b'tavin b'tavshel. That's why he puts this condition over here, like I mentioned, that if it was just the iser by itself, just a non-kosher garlic, you wouldn't be able to taste garlic. Okay, so that's the only case we're going to entertain Zev Zagadim, because Lamaisa we pass on to Shach and Taz, that this whole heter is only going to work if the Issa by itself couldn't do the job. Okay, so there it fell in, got dissolved inside. Okay, so they want to apply over here the din that it comes from Hilchos Shabbos, because that's where it's discussed. Because what happens over there in Hilchos Shabbos, take the Morgan Avram off the screen for a second. What happened over there? There was some soup burning on the fire, and they put salt in the soup before, but they tasted on Shabbos and it's not enough. So just to take all this mentioned before, the whole machlekes about salt, when it's called cooking, when it's not called cooking. So on Shabbos, somebody put salt into the pot while it was on the fire, and it's bishul. The salt wasn't cooked before, and it's there's no heter of bishul achar bishul. Not to go into the whole discussion of Shabbos salt. There's a whole discussion. Alter Rebbe's chiddush and the siddur. Not to go into it. You have kosher salt that was there already, but it wasn't enough. That there's enough salt. Now you're going to put in what is tantamount to non-kosher salt because it got cooked on Shabbos, and you added that. So l'chura, this is in Zev Zagadim. So the Magen Avraham discusses over there. B'chol leifan atavshel mutter. Ki ha'isur levada ein a morgesh. That's why Zev Zagadim. In other words, the little bit of salt you put on the end, that's not what's making it salty. That's what pushed it over the edge. Tell a joke. It's a milsa de bedichasa, but it's apropos over here. It's a child who was hungry. He goes to his mother, hungry. She says, eat a bagel. Comes back, I'm still hungry. Eat a bagel. Comes back again, eat another bagel. So he eats 10 bagels. Comes back to his mom, I'm still hungry. So she says, eat a bagel. So he eats 11th bagel. And now he's full. She says, oh, so stupid. I should have eaten the 11th bagel first. Okay, for Sheitzach Alein, he didn't fill it up from the 11th bagel. There's nothing special about the 11th bagel. But the 11th bagel did the job. And the 11th bagel was the same as the first bagel. And after the first bagel, he was still hungry. So too over here, you're putting in enough salt, so it's making the pot now a tasty pot, but it's not able to give a salty taste by itself. So therefore, Magen Avraham says not a problem. The Taz says, okay, if they all came in at the same time, then a tavshel also. In other words, what are you telling me that this is not having an effect? If you put it all in at once, the prohibited salt with the permitted salt, so then we can say Zev Zagadim. Says, but over here, how can you say that it's Zev Zagadim? If you know the history, you could give an interview and say how much salt did you have before. It's one thing, okay? But right now, as it is lefanenu, it does not have a salty taste to it, and now you're adding some salt to it. So obviously the salt is having effect. What kind of Zev Zagadim? Before it wasn't, and now it is. So we'll say Zev Zagadim. Says the Taz. In the case over there, it's in the Hilchos Shabbos that's talking about. If it went in at the same time, someone says Zev Zagadim. But if one Zechas, then we're not going to say Zev Zagadim.
So according to the Taz, you could put more in it, it'll be mutter, but if it's a little bit less, but it was last, it'll be usher.
As long as it's put in together, it'll be mutter.
Even if it's more
than at the end, if you put it at the end, you're putting it at the end, so it should taste good. So obviously it's what's giving.
In other words, even if it ended up being less than the other scenario, you put it together, it's still usher because it was done separately at the end.
Yeah. Because it's putting it over the threshold. It's bagel number 11.
According to the Taz, if you would say realize and add more salt, would that now change the whole picture?
What do you mean?
To make it mutter by putting in
Put in
other
some salt, beef, and a butter afterwards. Zev is him.
Yeah, now it's not last anymore, and now you're eating it narazai.
The lepail is. I don't think the vart is whether it's last or not last. The vart is that it didn't do the job yet. So if it didn't do the job yet, so it doesn't answer it. The problem over here is avida l'taima. So if you put in the salt and it was usher and it still didn't give enough taste, so it wasn't avida l'taima.
So in other words, if it did give enough taste, it doesn't help now to add more. You already had enough taste.
Exactly. And once it has enough, even though you're saying now it tastes good, and you say, "Hey, I just ushered it according to this. I'll put in some more salt." It's too late. You ushered it.
You have to want to put in more salt, or like it has to be like you
You'll
realize.
add some more water, put in some more salt, something like that. I don't think that's gonna work. In any case, it's somewhat questionable over here because this is maybe midin knas. So whether it's exactly the same thing is somewhat debatable. But anyway, they bring it as far as this issue is concerned. This inya is a gate. And this, when you're talking about a flavor factory, okay, you have a whole list of flavors, all different types of things. So I think I mentioned about the cut grass flavoring. I mentioned that once upon a time, no? Maybe back in Bas B'Cholav. Yeah? Sound familiar? I'll go put it, I heard the marshal. If I said it, so you'll hear it again. When you put together strawberry flavors, so two of the ingredients, when the artificial strawberry flavor has no hint of strawberry whatsoever. How did they synthesize it? So there's one flavor which is cotton candy flavor, artificial cotton candy flavor, and another one is cut grass flavor. Somehow you mix these two things together, it tastes like strawberry. Okay, they have to add some other things also, but these two notes, they call them. You're mixing together notes. Okay, so you're not tasting any grass. So the shaila when you say avidul taima, now obviously if you didn't put in this grass flavor or the cotton candy flavor, so the final product would taste completely different. So this is a whole big machlekes. When you say avidul taima, it has to be that taste. We're talking avidul taima. The regular cases, you're putting in salt and it tastes like salt. You're putting in garlic and it tastes like garlic. Here you're putting in cotton candy and it's tasting like strawberries. Is that called avidul taima? Anyway, this is a whole discussion. The Kashrus organization is not going to go into it, but just to illustrate that this is a very, very, very relevant topic. And how you could end up different achsheirim coming to different conclusions, because it's very difficult to find makedas for this. They're speaking precisely because they didn't used to really cook like this, and today I don't know whether it's most of the food produced like this, but certainly a very, very large amount of the food.
So it's kind of like putting two colors together and then it makes a third color.
Yeah, basically. Okay, while we're on the subject, very, very important inyan, which is also very, very negeya to cases where there's no bittul. It's not discussed over here. I'll look at the chat later. Let me just keep the continuity of thought. Another case where something is not bittul, which is very, very important halachically speaking, is if something is part of the recipe. The phrase for that is derech hasiyos b'kach. Derech hasiyos. This is discussed in Hilchos Pesach. The Alter Rebbe has a whole kuntres achron about it. And the Alter Rebbe says it's a rashba, and it's quoted by the Beis Yosef with nobody being chelik on it, and therefore it's the halacha. And either rashba that's talking about over there about yayin, and there's certain chumras in yayin, but the Alter Rebbe brings it proofs that it applies to shari surim also, and the concept is that if it's part of the recipe, then there's no bittul. Why? and you're thinking he go, to take the a balabatish way of explaining it, like al pisech. What's in your bittul? We're going to soon see later on. You see, there's something. Also, you have it. Taz mentions it. Something lachazusa, something which is a food coloring. Food coloring is also tiny amounts. You put in a little bit. You put in a tray for food coloring. So then it's 1 out of 1,000. But how can you say it's bottle? You put in a little bit of red coloring, the whole thing turns red. So what do you mean it's bottle? The whole thing's red. Bottle means that it's not nirgash. It's not, its metzias is not nirgash. No, it's kisler. That's even from bittul. The bittul is, you're not margish, it's metzias. So when it comes to tam, that means we don't taste it. When it comes to color, it means you don't see it. So if you see it, what's pshat? It's bottle. So we say chazus is not bottle taking. So if it's part of the recipe, so why are they putting it in there? They're putting it in there because they need it. They're putting it in there because it has ashpa. This is part of the recipe. If it's a regular way and they need this in order to make it, so that derech hasiyos, no like bottle. Now today we bring them from the basis according to the Rashba, which makes big problems in kashrus because now all of these ingredients are all us is everything. And that's why, in general, the idea of allowing something to put a hechsher on something that has a treif ingredient, the policy of all the major kashrus organizations, they don't allow it. But the evidence fell into another thing. But if it's derech hasiyos b'kach, even we'll learn later on in Tzaddik Tes next week about next week we skip, but the next year about mevatel isser lachatchilas. What happens if a guy does it? For him, it's not an isser. All discussion we'll get to later on Tzaddik Tes. So if you have a non-Jewish factory and they're putting in an isser, and it's an ingredient and it's less than shishim, so now what should be? There are those who want to say it's not a problem because it's mevatel isser lachatchila. He's putting it in lachatchila like that. Yeah, but for the nachri, it's not aser. You're not mevatel isser. Other ones say you're putting achsh on it, so it does apply. We'll learn later in Tzaddik Tes. But mitzad the inyan derech hasiyos b'kach, it doesn't matter what your kavanah was. If it's part of the recipe, it's not but. And this is a chumrah of the Alter Rebbe. The Neighbor Yehuda does not agree. He says this Rashba does not apply to all other isurim. But Alter Rebbe holds very strong like that, and it's a givaldik chumrah. It applies mamish all over the place because then derech hasiyos b'kach even b'diavad, there's no more bittul b'shishim. This is when it fell in by accident. Here, it's not just that you put it in on purpose, and we're giving a knas mevatel isser lachatchila. We'll learn it soon in Tzaddik Tes. But mevatel isser lachatchila means that al pidin it's bottle, but we're going to give you a knas. We're going to penalize you because you did something on purpose that you're not supposed to do. You're not allowed to be mevatel anything lachatchila. When you're saying derech hasiyos, it's a different word. It's not bottle b'chlal. The thing is not bottle, even b'diavad not bottle. So that is the din of derech hasiyos. This is the Avnei Alter Rebbe. Kol meichel shederech hasiyos yal yedei tziruf iser ha-meichel oser. Afim lo mugesh tam iser klal. Even though you don't sense any of this taste whatsoever, nevertheless the meichel is prohibited. Now we have a tzamach tzedek on this. And it's a very, very interesting thing which saves us in a lot of cases. Tzemach Tzedek is talking about a case where they were making sugar. They're making for Pesach, but it's not really a Pesach shaila. Just like today, sugar is highly processed, so then sugar was also highly processed. In order to filter out the impurities from the sugar, then they were boiling up the sugar, and the way they took out the impurities is they threw in blood from a behemoth. And all of the impurities, the schmutz, would attach itself to the blood, and then it was very easy to remove. So the shaila is this bottle is a not bottle? It's derech hasiyos. This is the way they make it. So the tzemach tzedek, it's a tshuva. The tzemach tzedek in machalik, whether it's part of the food or it's part of making the food, which in technical terms today, in food production, you have ingredients and you have processing agents. So normally, we don't differentiate. Lichatchila, we don't differentiate. And the ingredients go on the label. And ingredients means that it's put there because they want it in the food. A processing agent you also eat most of the time. Okay, you're going to end up eating it anyway, but it doesn't go on list of ingredients because technically it's not an ingredient because they don't want it in the food. They don't care if it's in the food or not. It does end up in the food, but it's just making their job easier. Okay, so today they don't use blood. They're using there's some of them using animal bones, this and that, but they're all burned out, so there's no time left in them. More common case, apple juice. So you see when you have freshly squeezed apple cider, it's very cloudy. So that's because pectin is a natural product of the fruit, and that makes it cloudy. So in order to get that out, so use a clarifying agent. It used to be that all the clarifying agents, the only clarifying agents available, contained gelatin. So it's a clarifying agent. You throw in this clarifying agent, which has a number of ingredients, including gelatin, and all of the pectin gets attracted to this clarifying agent, and then it's very easy and you filter it out. So you're putting in gelatin into the apple juice. The gelatin is generally, okay, we discussed a little bit in Basar B'Cholav, also in Pei Zayin, but Nasa K'etz, what's the din? Is our gelatin also Nasa K'etz? Anyway, gelatin, all the kashrus agencies hold the gelatin in treif. So you put in something not kosher. Yeah, but you take it all out. Okay, and are we worried maybe there's a little tiny bit left over there? And if it's derech hasiyose, it's never going to be bottled. So the Tzemach Tzedek brings down that only applies to something you want in the food. Over there by the blood would be equivalent to the gelatin over here. So the fact that something remains over there doesn't bother us. That's it. So if the prohibited ingredient is not part of the food, it's just put in there to take out something, then a meichel mutter. And it wouldn't be only to take out something. We have many different types of processing agents, all different sorts of things that they do we're soon going to see an anti-foam agent. We'll talk about anti-foam as another type of agent. When you have you're boiling spaghetti in your house and you don't take it off the fire in time, so what happens? It makes a lot of foam and it'll boil over and make a big mess. Okay, so that's in your house. So you made a mess. You take a shmata and clean it up, mop, whatever it is. If you're in a factory and you have a vat of 2,000 liters of soup cooking and it boils over, so then you have sakanas nefashos. Aside from the fact that your profit is literally going down the drain, so you don't want it to boil over, whatever it is you're making. So you have what's called the anti-foam agent. And these things, b'chlal processing agents, are very, very often fats and oils, which on the one hand makes them all a potential kashrus problem. But on the other hand, it also means that there's always going to be a kosher substitute, virtually always, because you have vegetable oil, you have mineral oil, sometimes you can use. Now you have something like gelatin, you need collagen, so that's more of a problem. So until they were able to, people used agar-agar, seaweed, but it didn't, our marshmallows, the kosher marshmallows were always very nebuchtik because the gelatin used was you couldn't use gelatin, so they use seaweed, they use agar-agar, and it doesn't hold its form, so they're always bent over instead of like the treifa marshmallows were like mamash, shaped like a pushka. But now they make the kosher ones out of fish gelatin, make it out of fish bones. So now we also have, we can be proud of our marshmallows.
What's an example besides that Tzemach Tzedek, he almost sounds like he's talking from the 21st century over here. What's an example back then of Meichel that's just the...
His example was, no, they did a lot of things. They did a lot of food processing then, but then the blood was being used as a clarifying agent for the sugar. He wasn't speaking theoretically. That was the shaila presented to him. They were throwing blood into the sugar to take out the impurities. That was the purpose. They many times they're using different things. So here's an example. This
fall under derech hasiyose, or because it's not the tam, it would like, is that something that is differentiated or not at all?
No, we're not. Derech hasiyose maybe has some other pu'ula, not just tam. Okay, like chazusa. Okay, chazusa is not derech hasiyose, but but if it's
These
having
pictures are straight from
having
Montreal.
a pula. Oh, so this is actually the all of these PowerPoints they were made in Eretz Yisrael. So they use an example of maple syrup. He said, so so they happened to hit my backyard because 70% of the maple syrup in the world comes from Quebec. You need for I'll just show you something here. We'll show you, get a close-up of this if you can see this over here. So this is a tap that you put in the tree. Okay, so here's the point. You can see that. So this goes, they bang this with a hammer into the tree. Okay, and then you have this little hook over here that they hang the bucket on. And then on the other end, you have this channel over there that the sap comes out. So they bang it into the tree at an angle like this. Okay, and they have the bucket on the bottom. So the sap comes running out of the tree and it drips into the bucket. That's how they make it. I picked this up at a factory. I'll just give you a little history. I think we have some time today. Hope I don't get too far, but no, yeah, we should be fine. I think we're going to be okay. I first came to Montreal in Tafshin Mem Gimel, so it's 40 years ago. So I came here, started getting my shimush then, started going to factories. One of the first factories I went to was the co-op for maple syrup, because they have different places where they'll make their own maple syrup, but the majority is made at a co-op because you have all of these farms, and they send it to a central place because it's really fascinating. They check the environment by checking the sap from the trees. That's one of the ways they monitor the environment. It's like doing a blood test on a person. So they tell what's doing with the soil and what's with the air. They take the sap from the trees, and it's a whole chachma. But it has different tastes, has different colors. So in order to make it your uniform products, they have to mix together. So they come together, and sometimes they'll boil it off. So the problem with the maple syrup, it makes a lot of foam. So I added some of my own slides over here to his PowerPoint. Maybe I'll do him a favor and share it with him. So here you can see some of these are the buckets hanging over there on the tree. If you do it like this, then you have to schlep around and take each bucket by hand. Today they have it with plastic piping that runs all the way down into a central place. So here you have a sugar house, they call it, and you see this, all of this cloud in the background is they're boiling off the sap. So you have to boil off the sap in order to make syrup. So how much sap do you need to make syrup? So it depends on the sugar content. There's a certain you keep boiling it off till you reach a certain sugar content. So sometimes there might be 40 liters to get 1 liter. Sometimes it might be 50 liters, might be less, it might be more. It all depends on the quality of the sap. But you see over here, this thing is going to start to boil over. So what the farmers used to do, oops, what happened to my picture? Okay. In any case, I had another picture. You can maybe see it over here. You see this thing hanging over here? So over here, this is a little sack that has chazer fat inside. And what happens is when the heat gets sufficient, it melts some of it and it drips in, and that's the anti-foam agent, and it calms down the whole thing so it shouldn't boil over. And then the whole thing cools off. So then the fat hardens until that amount boils out, and then it puts some more inside. So today they don't do it like this. Today they have chips. They look like soap chips because soap is also fat, basically. So it looks like soap chips, but it's just the same thing. It's animal fat, it's treifa fat, and they're throwing it as an anti-foam agent. In any case, it was one of the first factories I went to, and there was a new guy that took over, and they wanted very, very badly to get a hechsher because they wanted to sell in Israel. You see over here, this is syrup maple TV. Okay, this is a big item somehow in Israel, and you weren't allowed to import to Israel unless you had a hechsher. So they always came to us. They always came to us for the hechsher. Anyway, so they were always rejected because they couldn't control the anti-foam agent. Anyway, it's a whole story. If we have time left at the end, you remind me, there's some interesting things I could tell you about the maple syrup. But in any case, they didn't get it. Recently, basically, we went to the place where all of the farmers buy their supplies from. There's only a couple of places that supply for all of these farms, and we convinced them to carry only anti-famara hechsher. So the whole problem today has become almost wiped out. But as far as the halacha is concerned, this thing is not that it's bottled, bottled be'elef. It's like mamish. It's hardly any, but otherwise it's mevatel es lachatchila. It's still remaining there in the food. Now, could you answer mitzad derech hasiyosei? So according to the Alter Rebbe, would look like it is a problem because the derech hasiyosei is never bottled. But on Samach Tzedek, this chumrah of derech hasiyosei would not apply in this case because it's only there to help you with the process. Okay, questions? Okay, lo again weiter. Sif test. Moving on to Sif test. Or maybe I'll take it over there. There was a question over here. Shita the Taz. Wouldn't soft be subjected to the person eating to determine when it reached off the desired taste? Could be also to one mutter to another. Okay, you go by after it's tam kolodem. Kosher anchovies and Worcestershire sauce derech hasiyasa can be eaten with meat. Yeah, so they b'chlal the Worcestershire sauce that has fish in it, like the OU has an action, they have I think OUF on it, so you shouldn't eat it with meat. There's a whole machlekes fish and meat is a whole different story than what we're going into over here, because since it's union of sakana, we have a machlekes whether it's batal b'shishim or not. Because there are those that hold that since Chamira Sakanta Misura, that Sakana is more strict than an Isser, so an Isser would be bottle B'shishim. The Chazer is also B'shishim, but the fish is not also B'shishim, the fish is also B'mashru, because even from Sakana, we don't understand how much you need to have the Sakana. So it's never bottle. So according to Rav Paskim, if it happened, so Lechatchila, we're makbid even on a Mashru, but B'diavad, if it happened, most of the Paskim say you can let it slide, as long as they were shisha. Okay, next case. Last sif tzadik ches sif test. Isurim mavatlim zeh. Okay, so you don't get not to get distracted from the picture. So there's a case in the Gemara. It's an interesting case. Let's say you have 3 pieces of meat. One is from a horse. 3 isurim. You have a piece of horse meat. You have a piece of nevela. Let's say you have a piece of eagle meat. You got a kazayas, all of these things together. Now, Gemara entertains the possibility that since by pieces we have an inyan of bittul bereiv, the Gemara discusses whether a person that eats all 3 together gets malchus or not. So malchus, you got 3 sets of malchus. Why should you get malchus? Right? Don't jump. What are you going to get malchus for? You're going to get malchus for eating horse meat. The horse meat is bottle bereiv. You have only a meat of horse meat, so the horse meat is bottle. I give him malchus for eating the eagle. The eagle is also bottle bereiv. Okay, but yes, nevela, he ate nevela, but the it's also bottle bereiv. Okay, we're not going to discuss this case now, but it's just a mind-bending exercise to see that we're entertaining the idea of one isser nullifying another isser, and that's sif test. Okay, here you have a pat with 59 zaysim of heter. And here we have a kazayas of dam, and we have a kazayas of chelif. It looks like they're attached, but they're not attached. You have some forbidden fat, and you have forbidden blood. You have a kazayas of each. Okay, so they're going to fall into this pot now. What are you going to end up? You're going to end up with pot with how many zaysim? With 61 zaysim. That is 61 zaysim. You got 59 heter, and you have 2 of iser. So look, you're going to tell me it's not bottle b'shishim, but wait. Do you have tam chalev in this pot? What do you say?
No.
No, exactly. Why? because we got 60 zaysim that don't taste like chaylev. Because we got 59 zaysim of heter, and we have one zayis of dam, but the dam doesn't taste like chaylev. So there's no tam chaylev here. Now, do we have the taste of dam? Has the taste of blood in it? No. Also not. Because we got 59 parts of kosher and 1 part of forbidden fat. Okay, so you got 60 zaysim that don't taste like blood. So 1 zayis of blood falls in as batel b'shishin. Both of these things are batel b'shishin. And that's the concept of isurim mevatlim zeza. That they
fell in 100% at the exact same time?
Okay, so now let's get into the discussion. In the picture, they fell in the same time. Okay.
Even in the picture, the dam fell in first.
Wait. We're going to talk about it. You're asking a good question. We're going to talk about it. Yeah, because you want to throw Chtichanas and Nevela into the mix, right? Okay, let's leave Chtichanas and Nevela out for a second. Any case, let's first learn the Machaber. The Machaber doesn't hold Chtichanas and Nevela b'shari su. Okay, so even if they fell in Zachar, not going to be a problem. According to Ramah, that's a different story. They fell in there. But let's take this out of the ballpark of Chtichanas and Nevela and say they both fell into the same. Why is it mutter? Because I is chalav mitzdaref leheter leval tam because I is adam. Even though the chaylev is not kosher, it joins together with the 59 zaysim of kosher in order to be 60 to nullify the kazayis of dam, and so to vice versa. The 1 part of blood gets together with the 59 zaysim of heter in order to nullify the forbidden fat. So therefore, this whole pot you can eat. You thought bittul b'shishim was so simple. This is going to get more complicated. Let's say they both have the same taste. So then what's going to be? Both have the same taste. So how can you say that one is going to be? Let's say you had a kazayas a chaylev from a cow. And then you had a kazayas of shuman from an avela. Shuman and chaylev are both different types of fat, but they basically taste the same. A real mumcha can look at a piece and tell whether it's chaylev or shuman. I knew an old butcher who showed me how to tell the difference from looking at it, but normally you tell the difference in chaylev and shuman from where it is in the animals. The hindquarter is a chaylev and the forequarter is shuman. Then you have in the middle the whole chachma of Hilchos Nikur, recognizing chalavim which are prohibited. But in any case, basically the taste of chaylev and shuman is the same. Shuman, if the animal is kosher, the shuman is kosher. Chaylev, even if the animal is kosher, the chaylev is not kosher. Okay, so you have a kazayis a chaylev from a kosher animal, and then you had a kazayis of shuman from a nevela, and they both fell in. There's 2 different isurim, but they have the same taste. So how can you say that the kazayis of chaylev is going to join together with the 59 parts of the heter, and now we're no longer going to taste the shuman? It's all the same taste. How is it going to be mavatal? It has the same taste. So that's not going to work, this whole theory. It's not every 2 isurim. If they have the same taste, it doesn't work. Comes along the Chabaz Das, and he says something else too. In addition, even if they don't have the same taste, but it's the same iser, since they're both the same iser, we can't say one is mafatal the other. Okay? If the 2 isurim both have the same taste, or both of them are the same iser, yeah. So then it's not gonna work, this whole thing of vatlim zaza. So here you have 2 different isurim. I brought the example of chaylev and shuman. Could have brought an example like this. You have orla and kilayim. Orla is a tree, the first 3 years of the tree, so the fruit is prohibited. And kilayim, even if it's an old tree, but if it was, let's say you have an apple tree growing in a vineyard, okay, you have a problem with kilayim. So both of these cases, you're not allowed to eat the apple. The two apples fall in. They have the same taste, two different isurim. So one cannot nullify the other one. And so too, okay, goes another example over here. Here's a thing which is the same iser, but two different tastes. Here we have nevela. Then you have the regular meat from this chicken. Then you have the liver of the chicken. So the liver doesn't taste the same as, let's say, the breast meat. It's two completely different timing. So l'chora, one should nullify the other. So Chavos Das says no. You can't nullify the other one. They're both the same prohibition. They're both nevela. And in the case on the right-hand side, even though they're different prohibitions, but it's the same taste. They're both apples. So that's what, if they both have the same taste, which is the case on the right, which is the case on the left, they're both the same prohibition in the nevela. This principle does not work. The only case that this principle is going to work is if they both are different. It's a different prohibition and it's a different taste. And then we're going to say that the one is going to be mevatel. Good? Okay. Nobody's objecting. I'm going to get weiter. The plot thickens. Yes, what happens if one falls in and then the other one falls in? Okay, so let's give a similar case over here. Okay, let's here's the mechaber over here, Siftes. So let's look at the white part on the top first. That's the case we just learned. Kedera sheyesh bei nun tes. It's not Nason Tam over here. It's nun tes. It's 59. Okay, a pat. Sheyesh bei nun tes zeisim heter. That's 59 zeisim which are kosher. V'naflu bo shtei zeisim. And two zeisim fell in. Echad shel dam, echad shel chelef. Ignore the picture on the bottom for a second. This text, the orange text, the orange, yellow, whatever it is, goes with the picture. The white that I'm reading now is the text for the previous picture. So you have one shel dam, one shel chelef, kol echem mitztarefim anon tesh shel heter lavatel chaveri. Each one will join together to be mevatel. The other one, that's this case right over here. That's the first case of mechaber. Okay, that's clear. We're going to say the tafshil is mutter, and then because in this case you see one's chaylev, one's dam. It's two different prohibitions. One's fat, one's blood. Two different prohibitions, and the taste of fat is not like the taste of blood. So that's why each one can join with the other 59 to nullify it. Then we have the Chavos Das, and now we have this case over here in the yellow. So now, before we read, let's take a look at this surah over here. What happened? We have got the same kazayas chaylev on the right hand side, and we have a kazayas dam on the left hand side. Okay, on the right hand side, we have 30 zaysim of kosher. On the left hand side, we got 29 zaysim of heter. Now, neither pat is going to be able to nullify their zayis of isim. So the zayis achela falls into the 30 on the right hand side. The zayis dam falls into the 29 on the left. What's the story with the right hand pat? Aser. It's only 1/30th, not 1/60th. What's with the left hand pot? It's even worse. It's only 1/29th instead of 1/60th. Okay, so are you allowed to eat these? The food in this pot? No. We're talking now the machaber. Is the whole pot nasa nevela? Hello?
No.
No. So, for example, okay, let's say this whole pot fell into another pot. Let's take the left-hand pot, which had 29 zaysim of heter and 1 zayis of blood. Okay, so altogether it's 30 zaysim and it falls into a big pot. What are we going to have to nullify according to the machaber, who does not hold from chetich nas leveya? You're going to
Yes,
need 60 times what? 60 times 30 or 60 times 1?
1.
60 times 1. According to Ramah, who holds Chtichanas and Nevela, what are you going to need?
30.
But Pashas, you're going to need 60 times 30. That's what Pashas, what you're gonna need. We're going to see that Ramah doesn't require this, and this is going to be a Shayla Shach. Why not? Okay, but let's just keep life simple now, and we're going according to the Mechaber. There's no Nas and Nevela, so you can't eat the pot because there's no bittul b'shishim. You can't eat all the food in the pot. Can't eat the pot anyway. It's not edible. Okay, can't eat the food in the pot. There's no bittul b'shishim. Not the left hand pot, not the right hand pot. But be'etzim, the rest of it is not Nas and Nevela according to the Mechaber. So now you got a big pot, and that the right hand pot falls in, and now the left hand pot falls in. So now what happens? V'kein choft, let's read inside. V'kein choft has zeisim shel heter shenofel behem kazayis chelev. Okay, they're mixed up between the 29 and 30. So that into the 29 fell a kazayis effect. U'b'kedeira cheres hoyu shleishim shel heter b'nofel useicha kazayis shel dam. You have another pot which had 30 zeisim of kosher and it fell inside a zayis of blood. And they mixed together b'shegeg. It wasn't done on purpose. Mutter. And why is that? It could be an empty pot too. Because now what do we have? This is the same as the first case in the Mechaber. Because altogether, how many zeisim of kosher do we have? We have 59 zeisim of kosher. Then we have one zayis of chelev, one zayis of dam. According to the Mechaber, we have noch tichanas and nevela. So again, it's the same as the second case as the first case. Doesn't matter that it fell into 59, or whether it fell into different pots and they got mixed together later on. It had to happen b'shegeg because then it'll be mavatal l'chatchila. We're going to learn later on Sadik Tes. In the next year, we're going to learn they're not allowed to be mavatal l'chatchila. But if it was done b'shegeg, they got mixed together. So then it's the same thing as the first case. Question? The Ramayad's over here. But coach can base ace and echad gvina v'echad basar. The kol lechem mavatul chavere. The case it's very, very interesting. In some cases we're more strict about basar b'chalav. Some cases more lenient about basar b'chalav. Over there, the whole chiddush of this din is one isser being mavatul, another isser. But at least it's an isser. Over here, they're both heter. So for sure it's okay, says the Ramah. What's the chiddush? Okay, whole discussion prima godim. What is it? The Ramah is mechadish and udin over here. What exactly the Ramah is saying? But we're not going into the poshta pshat. Is that since they're both heter, so therefore we have nothing to worry. Good. Now I'll tell you what's not so good.
According to the Ramah, the case of the two pots coming together, where you have a pot of pots that had a zayis of color and another pot of pots that had a zayis of basar, he would still say the same thing. He doesn't say that the whole pot becomes.
Very good. So that is the Shaila the Shach. That's the Shaila the Shach. Why does the Ramah not jump in over here and say, like he does all over, but according to us, the we say Chtechanas and Nevela B'Shari Surim, the whole thing's also because it's too late. Once the Zayis of Chela fell into less than Shishim, the whole thing's Nas and Nevela. So now you're going to have to be Mavatal 31. Or if it's 29 plus 1, you're going to need to 60 times 30. So you're going to need I said 180, I meant 1800. Yeah, you're gonna in order to be mavatal it. So l'chor is nas and nevela. So why is the Ramah not jumping in over here like he does everywhere else and says, yes, I agree with this din. According to the Mechaber, it doesn't hold nas and nevela b'shari surim. The Ramah would agree with the first case because it all fell in at once that didn't have time to become us in the first place. But in the second case, the case on the screen now, which is in yellow, so you go back over here. The moment that these things fell in, okay, this is now 31 zeisim of nevela. And now the dam fell into the 29. He said, we got 30 zaysim in nevela. What good does it do to mix together nevela with nevela? Chtichnas nevela b'shari surim the Ramoses. That's the shach's question.
But if I say that, I think, but the coach case, when he says the coach case about
I'm having a hard time here. Doesn't sound so clear. I don't know. Your audio is.
1 second.
Maybe say a little louder. I don't know.
Yeah, sorry. Better?
Much better.
Okay. The kol shekain, is the kol shekain also referring to 2 pots? Because l'chayda, if you would have these 2
Not
pots
necessarily. Not necessarily. Let's make life simple and say it's going on the first case.
on the first case, because otherwise then the tam is
Otherwise,
becoming.
everybody holds it's nas and avela. No,
Well,
no, you
not
don't hold it.
nas and avela,
Excuse me.
nas
No,
cholov, nas
it's
basar.
heter. It's heter. No, it's the opposite. Kol shekain.
It's had
Over
there,
there,
but
over there's no issue of nas and avela. So then for sure it would be okay. No, all these cases are okay then because it's only heter.
wait, so we wouldn't say that the whole pot becomes basar and the whole pot becomes cholov?
We do, but until you mix them together. But then we don't have tam basa b'chalav once you mix them both together because they're both heter.
So let's say it's right.
Excuse me. I'm not getting with that say. Let's first understand the case where Ramah for sure has a problem.
Okay, so.
Let's go with the say. Okay, the Shach has a question. Why is the Ramah not saying anything? Why is the Ramah agreeing with this second case? First case, Mela. Okay, they fell at the same time. Good. One Isser and Mevatel the other Isser. There's no Tam Chalev, it's Batal B'Shishim. There's no Tam Dam, it's Batal B'Shishim. Life is good. But this case over here, the Ramah holds Chatich and Nas and Avela B'Shari Surim. So what's going on? So the Shach has 2 answers to explain the Ramah. Okay. The Ramah, and this is why I snuck in a little Chazara from Tzadik Beis when I mentioned the dinim of Chetich and Nas and Avela. So we say that the Mechaber holds that the whole thing becomes mamish like the Isser night, like a piece of Nevela by Bas B'Chalav only. So if you have one Zayas a Basar, one Zayas a Chalav, and you cook them together, you have 2 Zaysim of Isser. We don't say it's a Belua that the Basar absorbed Tam Chalav. We say it became a new Isser. Everybody agrees with that. But if it's another Isser, and you have Chalev that got absorbed, an ounce of Chalev got absorbed in an ounce of Basar, so when we say there's an ounce of Isser, so if it fell into something else, we don't need to be Mevatel 2 ounces, we only be Mevatel 1 ounce. Good. That's the Mecha. Comes the Ramah, and he says, we say, Nas and Chetich and Nas and Avela B'Shari Surim, even if it's not supposed to be Chalev, some forbidden fat, an ounce of forbidden fat fell into some kosher meat, we need, the Mechaber would say we only need 60 times 1, and the Ramah will say we need 60 times 2. He holds that this problem of Chedich Nas and Avela is not just possible Chalav Shari Surim. But then there's exceptions to the rule. What's exception to the rule? So the exception I gave you before was Lach Balach. If it's Lach Balach, the 2 liquids, then even the Ramah says there's no Chetich Nas and Avela. Remember when we learned this in Basa B'Chalav and some Tzadik Beis? So we brought down why he held like that, with those that hold B'Chlal that, anyway, not to go into the reasoning behind it, but bottom line, the Ramah says if there's Hefsid Meruba, and it's Lach Balach, then you only need to calculate against the Isser, not the Heter that got mixed together with. Okay, that's what the Ramah said back over there in Tzadik Beis. Says the Shach, why is it the Ramah is not saying anything over here? Because these things they're all liquids. The dam is a liquid, the chalev was melted and it was a liquid. He's talking about lach balach, perhaps the maruk. I didn't say that. Okay, you have to use your head. And you have to remember what you learned. Okay, as the Shach says. Otherwise, the Ramah would have to object. That's one answer the Shach gives. Shach gives another answer that we really can't understand till we learn Siman Tzadik tests. So I'll just say the words. And without going into the idea, although we did have a similar idea about yediyah, about knowledge achieving bittul. We spoke about sticking a coffin twice. If you knew in between, you didn't know in between. So Ramah is going to say later on that if they got mixed together b'shegeg, meaning that you didn't know that it was aser, so then there's also bittul. Therefore, he says over here in this harv b'shegeg that there's not going to be l'shitas haramah. The Shach doesn't agree, but shitas haramah that the idea of nas and nevel is only after you know that it fell in. You know there was an issa that fell in. So let's say over here it fell in over here the zayas of fat, and he thought it was shuman, he thought it was kosher fat. I mean, the classic example for that the Gemara brings for Asham Tali is there were two zaysim, one was chaylev, one was shuman, and one person ate one, the other person ate the other one, and nobody knows whether they ate the shuman or the chaylev. They bring Asham Tali because they have no way of telling. That's a classic case. So over here, the chaylev fell inside, and they didn't know it was aser. Okay, or they didn't know that the dam fell inside. Whatever the case was, they found it later on. So therefore, since it's nisarvu b'shegi, the Ramah is not worried about mevatel isla chila. For a side reason, he's going to explain later on Tzadik Test that Ramah, this whole Indian that he knew b'shegi, and he found out later on. So there was no nasa nevela since he didn't have knowledge of it. Okay, so that is the two answers that the Shach brings over here. So. Okay, and this is according to Shitas HaMachaber. And if it's lach balach, you're going to have to change the whole PowerPoint. So I'm not going to do that. I guess we'll learn that this picture goes according to the second teretz of the Shach. But otherwise, this whole Machaber is talking about two liquids, one which is mutter, one which is aser. So instead of it falling into a kedera, meaning pieces of meat and potatoes and whatever it is it has over there, it fell into soup. Okay. What time is it now? 8:25. Okay, so we're going to take a 10-minute break. And we'll come back at 8:35 in Mirz Hashem.
Can we address quickly the basar and the chalav? Or we're going to say that it's just going according to the first case and so?
Let's keep it according to the first case. Simpler. Okay. Okay. Fine. So let us proceed. So I see over here, I stopped a little bit short of this this last case. So before we begin the Tzadik Test, so we have on the PowerPoint what I presented to you, Balpeh, which is the Shach's question on the Ramah. According to Ramah, both of these pots, since the Ramah holds that it's not only about basar b'chalav that we say chanan, so then what's the reason that's going to be mutter? So the first answer, that was back over there in Simon Tzadik base, the long Ramah over there. And the second teretz, until it got mixed together, you didn't know about it. So that we're going to learn later on in Tzadik Test. Not today, but that's another way of explaining the Ramah, and that's Fine. Now let's go on to Simon Tzadik Test. And the first subject we're going to be dealing with, which is today's topic, through Aleph through Dalet, it's Taruvos Shishim. What can you count towards Shishim? What do you mean? What can you count towards Shishim? I mean, what's ever there as part of the count towards Shishim? What's the shayla? So the shayla is, can we count things that are not normally thought of as food? For example, the bones. Can we use the volume of the bones to be mevatel shishim? Because let's just think for a second. Assuming that the bones have no taste, and we'll talk about that soon. But let's say a piece of bone. A piece of bone has no taste. Take an eggshell. So can you use the eggshells? So if we need shishim, let's say a kazayas of blood fell in. Okay, so we want to know whether when you eat this tafshil, whether there's a taste of blood. Now, if the eggshell absorbs part of the blood, the chura would seem reasonable to say we can use the eggshell as part of shishim. It is absorbing some of the taste. So the taste is going into the eggshell, or the bones for that matter. So we can use the bimatzara peshishin. Well, if you're going to go so far, what's with the walls of the pat? We know that the taste goes into the walls of the pat, right? That's why we say tam ke'ikir. Say tam ke'ikir, the taste goes into the pat. So can we use the volume of the pat also to be mavatl shishim? Okay, that's going to be our subject of these 4 sifrim. So here's some nevela fell into the pot. You have a pot of kosher chicken with potatoes, with string beans, and then a nevela fell inside. So eila chalakim basir mitzdarf from levatel es eser b'shishim. Which parts of this pot can we count towards the total of 60 to nullify this nevela to be able to eat the rest? So we have a question about the bones, the atzomis, the upper right. We have a question about the tafshil, is all the food over there counting? What's with deifan hasir? What's with the actual wall of the pot? And what about the blias? Let's say there's taste. If you remember, when we were discussing about the inyan of nas and avelu within the keli, so then let's say you have a milcha kapat, and then you cooked meat inside. So we had a discussion, do we say nas and avelu? Let's say you knew there was a kazayas of milk. So we had over there the 2 days that we brought to. We had the Ramban. We don't pass him like this Ramban, but the Ramban that says there's no chtich nas and avelu for the taste absorbed in the wall of a pot. Okay, we pass like the Mechaber, that there is such a thing in Nevela. Tam Ke'ikr goes on the Chetich and Nevela too. So the whole amount is going to be considered that it absorbed the taste, and now it's Nas and Nevela. So if it absorbs the taste, Manav Shach. So you want to be so strict in talking about absorbing the taste, so maybe we can at least get a leniency out of it, and we can say, use the volume of the pot to be Mavatal B'shishim. Maybe. Nice idea, huh? Sachidish. We'll soon see. Doesn't really work, but we'll soon discuss. Okay, so let's first talk about the bones. So this actually, you have over here on the left-hand side, you have a bunch of bones over there. Somebody took the steak off of the rib steak, and you just got the ribs hanging out over there. So really, the marker for this whole idea of bittul b'shishim, let me give you the overview. The overview of this is, we have a machlekes Bavli and Yerushalmi. Do the bones count? And to put it in broader terms, things which are not edible. Okay, we'll soon see that when you have a bone with marrow inside, meach as it's called Lashon Kodesh, that the marrow is considered to be basar. So that we're not talking about that. We're talking about a bone that does not have either the bony part of the bone, or we're talking about a bone that does not have marrow inside. So that people would make kalim out of bone china. The people would make it out of real bone. Because you have a whole discussion Hilchos Pesach about which kind of materials can you kasher. So we know kli cheres you can't kasher because ceramic, the taste won't come out. But metal you can kasher, you can get the taste out, and it says over there bone you can also kasher. If you have a keli which is made out of bone, and you use it for spaghetti, so you can kasher it for Pesach. Okay, so it's a keli. It doesn't have any taste on its own. So it comes out, according to Talmud Yerushalmi, that these sort of things do not have iser, and you can use them to be mavatal the pot. Not only the bones of the heter you can use to be mavatal, even the bones of the nevela you could use according to Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi, you're talking about other things, nutshells with eggshells and things like this. But we see that something which is inedible, it's used as part of the calculation of to be mevatl, part of the cheshbon of shishim. But you look in Bavli, Masechta Chum, where it's discussing the whole idea of bittul b'shishim, and a long time ago this question was asked here, and I just sort of pushed aside. We could get to it later. Well, now is later, because the concept of shishim over here, if you look on the left, maybe it doesn't look like it, but this is an el nazir. El nazir, you have a nazir. See, hatei we say in Ezom came over the hatei of el nazir. Yeah. So what's the difference between them and a shlamim? So we say that Shlomim you eat for 2 days. Shnei yom v'layla echad. And Te'ev Nazir is only 1 day and the night afterwards. Okay, but both of them amurim behem, kiyetzu behem. You have certain parts which are taken out, which have the same time limit and space limit, but they're given to the Kohanim and their family. So by a Nazir, you take out the Zreya B'Sheila. You take the arm of the El Nazir. So you cook it in a pot. You have Lishchos Nazirim over there, and as the Snoshim, and they take a pot and they cook up this El Nazir, and then you take the arm off the ram and you give it to a Kohen, and the rest of it anybody can eat. Now, you cooked it together. The Yisraelim and Leviim are not allowed to eat the arm, the Zreya B'Sheila. So what's going on? Since it was all cooked together, you have the taste of the Zreya B'Sheila in the rest of the aisle. So Gemara says, and if you make the calculation of how big the Zreya is in comparison to the rest of the aisle, it's Shishim, it's Batal B'Shishim. So we see from here the marker for the din of Batal B'Shishim. The problem is the Gemara says this Cheshbon of Shishim only works if you count the bones. If you count all of the bones of the ram, and you count the bones inside the Zreya B'Sheila, inside the forearm of this ram, so then it's going to work out the Shishim. But if you leave the bones out of the calculation, the whole thing doesn't work. So we see from the Bavli that the bones have the same din as the basar. The bone of the Zreya B'Sheila, of the arm, shank bone, whatever you call it, has the same din as the basar. And the bones with the rest of this ram have the same din as the basar of the ram. So if you look in the Bavli and Masechta Chulin is talking about the Zreya B'Sheila, talking about the El Nazir, then it looks like the bones have the same status as the meat. But if you look in Yerushalmi, so the Yerushalmi says those things which are inedible you can use them as part of the bittul. It's not considered to be part of the food. So we have a machlekes, Bavli, Yerushalmi, basically. And we have two basic ways in the Rishonim to try to settle this machlekes. How do we reconcile this Bavli and Yerushalmi? And it's going to be reflected. Can we use these bones as bittul? Ma din atzama seisr. So the Shulchan Aruch is bringing basically is the Hezber, the Rashba, and he has a very simple solution. We pass like Yerushalmi. We pass like Yerushalmi. How you pass like the Yerushalmi? Because the Bavli is just an asmachta. It's not saying that this is mamash makar. It's an asmachta. It's sort of a way to help you remember the din. However, you learn asmachta. There are those that the Rambam Makdam Pirish Mishnayos, he wants to say that. Smachtas more like that. That it's just sort of a way to remember to Rishonim, Ritva. Say, how can you say such a thing? In any case, it's not a clear mucker. So it's not really a machlek. It would be a machlek as Bava Yerushalmi. It's not so easy to pass like the Yerushalmi. You need some other reasons to do so. But obviously, according to the way the Rashba learns, it's not real machlek as Bava Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi holds what it holds, and the Bavli it doesn't really hold like that. It's going up to Hezbollah way to a mucker. The real mucker shishim is because that's when Tam is nirgash. That's the solution of the Rashba, and that's the Shulchan Aruch paskins. So then, when the Shulchan Aruch mechaber paskins, how do we put together the calculation of shishim? You can count all the bones to be mavatul. In the case over there, it was a nevela chicken that fell inside. All the meat of the nevela chicken, you can measure against shishim, and you can count in the shishim all that stuff that was in the pot, including the bones of the kosher chickens, and including the bones of the treifa chicken. Nevela chicken. All of that is counted as part of the shishim because the bones don't have any taste. Okay, that's where the Rashba solves this predicament. The Ran has another solution. And the Shach paskins like the Ran. The Ran says that you don't have to push away this Bavli from Malach. It's talking about two different types of bones. Okay. When do we say that the bones, there's soft bones and there's hard bones? When do we say that the bones has the din of the basar? The bones have the din of meat when they're soft bones. That's what the Ran says. And the Bavli is talking about soft bones. And that's why it says the bones are considered part of the calculation of the meat. The Yerushalmi says that the bones are not considered like meat. That's talking about hard bones. And the Bavli would agree with that. So the Ran makes shalom between the Bavli and Yerushalmi. Says it's talking about two different types of bones. So Lamaisa, what does that mean? So according to this Ran, the Shach Paskins like this Ran. Okay, then when it comes to this calculation, yes, you can use bones to nullify the meat, but only the hard bones. The soft bones goes in the cheshbon of the meat. It says Shach Atzamos Iser Harakes Mitzarfes LeIser. The soft ones are considered like part of the meat of the Iser. So that Machlekes Rishainim ends up, very often you have the sense that there be a Machlekes Mechaber Ramah, but here ends up being a Machlekes between the Mechaber and the Shach. The Shach seems to be paskins like this Ran. Okay, you notice there's a big space in the middle. You also notice that we didn't say what the Ramah holds. Okay, and that's because the Ramah carves out, pardon the expression, a type of pshara over here. The Ramah says as follows. The Ramah says, if there's no hefsid, leave the bones out of the picture. Okay, just forget about the bones. The Shulchan Aruch wants to say it's heter. Okay, the Shach wants to say these are iser. Forget about all the bones. Don't be mitzdaref, leila iser, v'leila heter. If there's no hefsid. But makam hefsid, then we'll say you can use the bones to be matter, but only b'makam hefsid. That's what the Ramah says. We'll soon see the Ramah inside. Okay, the meach, the marrow, which you can see inside this bone over here, since it's fit to eat. So everybody holds that this is considered to be part of the basar. We're talking about mitzvah of the bone. So you can't just take the volume of the bone. If it has something inside of it, then you have to be concerned about that. Okay, I wish I had the Ramah, the Shulchan Aruch here to read, but we have some other. Okay, let's go further and we'll come back. We have some other side issues to discuss here, but let's go a little bit further. So now we took care of the bones. Now let's talk about the pot. What's with the pot? So first, I have to give a little bit of an introduction over here, that they don't make pots the way they used to. Pots used to be much more absorbent. When we say stainless steel absorbs, yes, stainless steel absorbs, but it doesn't absorb and emit taste the same way pots did in the old days. You have cast iron pots, for example. You have certain type of pots that you have to season them before you can use them because they absorb, so you have to use some oil in order to absorb the taste. There's some sort of pots that they emit, even a stainless steel frying pan, for example, you'll fry onions in it, and even if you clean it, later on it'll give off the taste of onions. But that has a very strong taste. But especially the sorts of metals that they used years ago, and especially you're talking about the days of Shulchan Aruch and go back further to the days of Gemara, the days of Klei Midyan. So then they absorbed substantial amounts of taste to the extent that people could taste. You boil water in a fleshika pot, you could taste the taste of meat. You cook the water in a milk gabanyemi, people could taste the taste of milk. Okay, today people can't do that. There's even such a tenua. You have a whole group of modern rabbanim in Eretz Yisrael that want to say that with Bachal, we don't have to worry about kosher kalim today. Stainless steel hardly absorbs anything anyway. And you want to say, according to Tam, who has it? There's no Tam anyway. If you remember, we had this discussion earlier about do we rely on Te'imas Yisrael for something? can you rely on? We don't rely on a nachri, even if it's msiach lefitume, whether something tastes like something. But what about a kain tasting something and to see if there's truma in it? The kain's allowed to eat truma. Or let's say you want to see whether a knife is fleshik or not. Okay, so you cut something with it and you taste it. So the Shach says that Bismana said we can rely on Timas Yisrael, and the Taz indicates that we cannot rely, that our taste buds are also not like they used to be. So do we say that just because our taste buds don't work like they used to be, so then there's no Isser to Tam Keker anymore? We say that we have difficulty tasting things, if somebody is unable to see it, that doesn't mean that things don't exist just because he can't see them. Just because we don't taste them doesn't mean the taste is not there. So Lepeil, La Halacha, this is nitcha completely from Halacha to say that today there's no Isser on Kalim. But everybody does agree, it's a Metzias that the Kalim are different. There are different types of Kalim even today. Some of them absorb more than others. So we're talking over here about Tam being absorbed in a Kali. You have to think more about the Kalim in those days. And what happens is, let's say the volume of the metal is, I don't know, 20 zays, let's say. So what would happen when the Tam, if you cook a piece of meat that's 5 zays, it's possible that when you cook it, it gets smaller. And at least in Higoyin, theoretically, that an ounce of that taste went into the walls. And we're talking about sort of mamashas over, it gets absorbed into the walls. So you had a brand new pot. So like we learned earlier that if you have a brand new pot, you cook the kazayas cholov, you only have to measure against the kazayas. It didn't absorb more than a kazayas. You only cooked the kazayas of milk in there. So then the certainly cannot be more than a kazayas. Okay, but can we count? I'm trying to make more rationally acceptable the idea that you can be mitzdaref the keli to nullify the taste of the nevela. Because if the taste of the nevela is going into the pot and the pot is highly absorbent, so you're not going to taste, let's say, with the food in the pot, let's say leave the bones out of the picture for the moment. Let's say, we'll pass like the machaber, we'll count the bones. Okay, when you count everything, count the bones, you still don't have shishim against the meat. I mean, you look at this pot over here, there's a pretty big chicken, yeah, this nevela. So it doesn't look like you have shishim over here, okay? But let's say, if it could include the volume of the pot, then you do have shishim. Let's even just say the amount of pot, to make it simpler, which is below sea level, so to speak. You see the soup over here, you see a line over there, so the bottom 2/3 or so is covered with liquid. So let's say if you could count the tam nevela is not only going into the chicken and the potatoes and the water and everything else over there, it's also going into the walls of the pot. If we could say that, maybe there would be shish. So if you say in this picture, probably not, but let's imagine a case there would be shish. So then, if the taste is in reality going into this porous metal, okay, so are you going to taste nevela in the soup? No, because the taste is not going to be more than shishim in the soup, because it's going into the walls of the pot, just like it's going into the potatoes, and it's being dissipated in the potatoes. It can be dissipated in the pot too. So this is the discussion. I'm not saying we paskin like this, but this is just to make more rational this whole havamina. What is it that we're talking about? Now, let's say it's already a used pot, so it's going to absorb the taste. So there's a whole discussion in the paskin. Maybe there's an exchange program. Let's say previously it was a kosher fleshika pot, and then you put some nevela in there. So maybe if you see that the nevela didn't go down in size, so how can you say that it got absorbed over there into the walls of the pot? Okay, maybe it made an exchange program over there. Azayas went in and Azayas came out. You don't see a whole thing. Anyway, that's the discussion now. Starfus l'shishim deifan asir. What's with the wall of the pot? Panos asir einem et starfus l'shishim lebatel asirs. Bottom line is you cannot use the walls of the pot to be mevatel. Listen, we have two basic explanations. You have the Prisha. So the Prisha is a commentary on the Tur. You have the Prisha and the Drisha. The Prisha and the Drisha, both the same person, but he made like a more simple explanation of the Tur. Frequently quotes the Beis Yosef. And then the Drisha is going into more dakistik inyanim, things which are more controversial, more pilpul. That's the Drisha. The Prisha and the Drisha, same person. He also wrote the Smeh on Chesha Mishpat. So the main you have Taz on Chesha Mishpat also, but the place where the Shach and Taz are in Yeredeya, and the Magen Avram and the Taz are in Arachayim. So when it comes to Chesha Mishpat, you have the Shach and you have the Smeh. Okay, and he's also the Bala Prisha Badrisha. So he's quoted over there, Rebbe quoted in this Hakdama. He quotes halachas from his mother. Anyway, his mother was a big Mulumedes. In any case, the Prisha explains over here, why is it we cannot use Laman Nigara? The bones absorb taste, and we can be mitzdaref l'shishim. So Laman Nigara, why can't you use the kelim to mimabaka? So the Prisha says like this: Asir belua mimacholim kedim. Normally, we're talking about a used pot. So the pot is already full of taste. We don't know that it absorbed anything new. We're chayshish that it did. And we've used this concept many times. We're not sure how much it absorbed, and not sure how much it gave out. So therefore, we have to take the worst case scenario. Okay, and that's and you can't even count that as a suffix. It's a chesed yediyah, such a thing. So how can you count something if you don't even know it absorbed before? You don't even know whether it absorbed anything before. In fact, when it comes to bones, if you had cooked the bones before, we'll soon see, you can't be mitzvah of the bones. If the bones of the nevela were cooked together with the nevelas and the take, you can't use the bones to be mavatal the iser anymore, because the bones themselves became aser. They absorbed tam iser. What's with a brand new pot? So brand new pot you can use. He says, we say plug. You get mixed up. This is new, this is half new. We don't allow kelim. Since normally kelim are used, they're only new once. After you use them once, you're going to use them many times afterward. They're always going to be used. Okay, so you can't be mitzvah of the kedera. That's the explanation of Prisha. The Pritayar, you have a sefer. Now they print them individually, but you have over here Peiros Genesar. It's called Peiros Genesar. Peiros. There's two Peiros, and it's a Shulchan Aruch with the Pri Chodesh and the Pritayar. They're the Peiros. So the Pri Chodesh we quote quite frequently. Alter Rebbe frequently quotes very frequently quotes the Pri Chodesh. He's printed in the back of all the Shulchan Aruchs in general. And Pritayar was the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh wrote a sefer of Psak Halacha. That's the Pritayar. So he says, it's a different svara. It's an interesting svara. Asir lo nimsa b'techet tavsh. Elarak makifim mibachutz. It's different when it's surrounded on all sides, or it's only on one side. So we say that the keli is boileya only from the inside. Okay, but you cannot compare. It's a stretch to we have a machlekes Bavel Yerushalmi, at least one that needs a solution, before the solution, whether even the bones, which is mamish sitting in the pot, and it's absorbing time from all sides, whether you mitzvah of that. Here you have a keli, it's only absorbing from one side. So that we have no mucker to treat it like the bones, even, because it's not b'techet tafshel. So this is a very significant svara, because then there's a big nafka min ladina. If he's there, b'klish nimsa b'techet tafshel yochel etztarif. Let's say you put a spoon inside. So the spoon inside is surrounded from all sides. So l'chora, according to the Prisha, so kelim you can never use, either because it already absorbed taste, or because of leplug. But according to the Pritayar, who says that it's only because it's absorbing from one side, so then if it's absorbing from all sides, a spoon fell inside, so why should it be any worse than a bone, or a potato, or a string bean, or anything like that? So anyway, it's an afkamin. Allah l'maisa, we're not mitzdaref under any condition there. Prima Gadim wants to entertain the possibility of being mekel according to this Pritayar, but halach lamaisa, we don't really do this. The Mefarshim bring down another issue that, if you remember earlier, we talked in the beginning of Tzaddik Ches about being mitzdaref the pot, about asering the pot, and we had over there a Mordechai. Was machalik between a klicheres. Oh no, it's not over here. It's earlier. Yeah. Oh, we had it way back over there. Whether the Mordechai said that a klicheres would absorb. It differentiates between a klicheres and other types of materials, because other types of materials you can kasher. So the taste goes into the metal, then you do a gal's kelim, the taste comes out of the metal. But the taste never comes out of a klicheres, and therefore you aser it in a way that you wouldn't a regular keli. So some of the Mefarshim ask over here, what's going on? Why does the Ramah worry about the bones too? So the Nesa Kalim bring down, what are you comparing? The bone has the same din as the klimatches. Doesn't have din of a klicheres. A klicheres, taki, you can't get the taste out of, but the bone you can get the taste out. So therefore the bones have the same din as a regular keli, and therefore you can be mitzvah of the bones. I mean, according to the three opinions we have, the Mechaber, the Shach, and the Ramah was in between. So now let's see the halacha inside. So halacha l'maisa, we are machmer, we're not mitzvah of the pot at all, and here we'll see finally the sif inside. So Siman Tzadik Tesef Aleph Chatichas Nevela Sheyesh Ba Basar Vatzomis. You have a piece of nevela, and there's meat and there's bones. In the picture we had a chicken, and the chicken has meat and the chicken has bones, but unfortunately it's a nevela. Shenafla lakaderas heter, and it fell into a pot full of kosher food. So what can we use to count towards the shishim, to nullify this nevela? So atzomis ha'isr mitztarfim ima heter lavatal ha'isr. You can use the bones of the Isser. Not only can you use the bones of the Heter, you can even use the bones of the Isser. The bones of the nevela chicken you can use, because the bone doesn't have taste. Mechaber Paskins like the Rashba, like the Rishalmi, that the things that don't have taste can be included to be Mavatal the Isser. And I don't even need to say Kol Shekain, that the bones of the kosher chicken count with the flesh of the kosher chicken to nullify the nevela. Aval hameich shabatzomes iser mitzdarefim me'iser. However, the marrow, which is in the bones of the nevela, does get included in the calculation of the volume of the basar. As we said, since the meich is edible and it has taste, so therefore it has the din of basar. So even though it's inside the bone, but the bone you can count, but not the marrow inside the bone. However, but the actual part itself, you cannot count as part of the shishim leim iser v'leim heter. Can't count as part of the iser. You don't count as part of the heter. You leave it out of the picture. Now the Ramah brings down another day. You can use the bones of the kosher, that you can use. But the bones of the Issa, the Ramah wants to say, or he doesn't want to say, he's bringing down these Yesh Machmirim, that say that you cannot use the bones of the Isser. The Iker is not like this Daya. The Iker is Taka like the Rashba, the Rama holds. But in the case of if it's a case of hefsid, you should rely on them. If it's not a case of hefsid, you should be machmer and do not count the bones. And as we said before, and the shach has a completely different sheet over here. The shach paskins like the ran, and the difference is you're talking about which type of bones. You're talking about soft bones, the basar. Talking about hard bones, then it's then it could be mitzdarif. So Yerushalmi said to me mitzdarif is hard bones. And the Bible it says it counts as part of the bus. Talking about soft bones. Questions? Okay, this whole question about the bones of Isser was a whole big discussion. And again, we mentioned it at the end of some Peizayin when we made some mention of gelatin. And it brought down over there those that were saying about the skin of the keva, that if you, the end of Peizayin, it was talking about making cheese, and you take the stomach of the calf, and if you dry it out, it becomes like eights. It becomes like a piece of wood and it has no more time. So then there were those that wanted to allow it, and we had a whole discussion. Yeah, okay, it became like a piece of eights, but then when you soak it in liquid, then it becomes soft again. And what happens if the whole intention was to dissolve it later on? Can you call it like a piece of wood? So when you're talking about gelatin, it's the original discussions, the famous heter of Chaim Ezer for gelatin. But Lamaisa, for many reasons, the kashrus agencies don't rely on this today in the machmar gelatin, and one of them is that we're not talking about only bone. That the method of production today, although yes, it ends up ultimately getting dried out, but into the original process, you're not soaking it in acid to take off all the meat. You're drying everything out, but it has parts of it when it's being processed that also definitely have tam. And anyway, that's just another consideration for being a machmer. Okay, so that is basically Sif Aleph. Now, Beis and Gimel are a continuation of a theme. As I mentioned before, that the only reason the bones of the nevela are kosher is because they did not yet absorb the taste of the nevela. But let's say it was a pre-cooked nevela. So you picked up this nevela in San Costco, was a barbecue chicken, and it's already cooked. If it's already cooked, so then the bone, so let's say we're going to treat it like a keli, but once you cook it together with nevela, it absorbed tam nevela. So how can you use the bone, which is now usher because it was cooked together, it absorbed the tam, so then for sure you cannot use it to nullify the isser. It itself is the isser. For carrot, we can't not count it as heter, we have to count it as part of the isser because it absorbed tam. As he says in Sif Beis, when does this apply? That the bones of isser count as part of the heter, as part of the kosher part. When this nevela fell in, it was a raw chicken. It never been cooked before. Over here, chaya doesn't mean it was even in a chaya, a live chicken fell in. Over here, chaya doesn't mean it's alive. Chaya over here means raw. So it fell into the pot when it was raw chicken. Since it was raw chicken, so the bones of this nevela, to raw nevela, so the bones of the nevela never absorbed the taste of the nevela. But at first you had cooked this nevela. And then after you cooked it, then it fell into the pot of kosher food. So then this whole thing doesn't work. The bones in the nevela, not only it won't count as part of the heter, it counts as part of the iser. The fish of bowl and mibsara nevela kishanis bashal levada. When it was cooked by itself, the bones of the nevela absorb the time, absorb the taste of the nevela. So therefore, this whole thing of Sif Aleph, that you can count the bones, is only talking about raw bones. Cooked bones is too late. It already absorbed the time. It's like a treif and a keli. It's like, imagine, you took a metal pot and you cooked nevela in it. So you're going to use the pot to count as heter. On the contrary, it's going to answer whatever you cook inside of it. So too over here, the bones, since they already absorb the taste of the basar and nevela, so therefore, right now, it's also going to be counted part of the Isser. Clear? Everybody's still saying l'chaim over here.
So the fact that the bone was part of the Isser for its whole existence doesn't do anything. Only when it gets cooked. That's what seals the deal.
Exactly. Live things do not absorb. Okay. Your teeth. You know, even if you eat a hot piece of pizza and you're going to be machmer like a dover gush, nevertheless, your teeth are still alive. Unless your teeth are dead.
But even your hands, that's a difference.
And this and that. Yeah, or your hands also. I mean, normally you don't stick your hands into such hot food, but even if you did, it's
no, you said that earlier. When you touch your hands onto the batzar, it doesn't mean your hands became flesh.
Yeah, even if it was hot, things which are live do not absorb. Sif Gimel, Bishari Surim. So this is just another chazara of Nas and Nevela. Bishari Surim Chutz Mibasa B'chalav, the Mechaber says, going according to Shita, say that he holds like Rabbeinu Ephraim. Chaticha blua me'eser, a piece that absorbed something prohibited, mitztarefes levatel le'eser. You can use it. Oops. Hit the wrong button over here. Excuse me. Where am I? Yeah, Gimel. You can even use the piece. But the Ramah, why? Because he doesn't know from Chatichas Nas and Nevela. So what happened over here? Let's say you have a piece of meat, piece of kosher meat, 2 ounces of kosher meat. Falls inside the 2 ounces of kosher meat, an ounce of dam, an ounce of blood. So now you got a piece that now weighs 3 ounces. Or the volume 3 fluid ounces, whatever the case is. It blew up from the blood. Okay. So now you can't eat this piece of meat. But now this piece of meat fell into another pot. It fell into the pot. So now, what do you need to be mavatal? You need to be mavatal, according to the Mechaber. He doesn't hold of Hanan only by Basar B'cholav. He doesn't hold it by other prohibitions. Doesn't hold Hanan B'shari Surim. Yeah. So, although you can't eat the piece of meat because you don't have 60 times the amount of blood, but now it fell into another pot. So how much do you have to nullify? You need 60 times 1 or 60 times 3? According to the Mechaber.
1.
60 times 1. Can you count the 2 ounces of meat as part of the 60? So the Mechaber says, yeah. Even though you can't eat it, but since it's not Nas and Nevela, so it's part of the kosher part of the pot. If it's Basar B'cholav, you can't. But Bishari Sum Chutz in Basar B'cholav, the Chaticha Blua Me'eser Mistaraf L'Batel Eser. That piece that absorbed the prohibited food is also counts as part of the Shishim. But the Ramah disagrees. Why? Because as we know, Ramah holds Hanan B'shari Surim. And therefore he says, Ve'ein Negin Kain. We don't do like this. Kikaim Alon. Because we hold B'chol Isurim Chetich Nas Nevela. By all Isurim we hold Chetich Nas Nevela. Kedilil Simon Tzadik Beis. We learned already in Basar B'cholav. We mentioned before, we go back and forth between Basar B'cholav and Taruvos. So over there in Taruvos, in Basar B'cholav, for the Taruvos, now in Taruvos, it refers back to Basar B'cholav. And now Sif Dalet. So Sif Dalet is a continuation on a theme and slightly more esoteric, for lack of a better word. Okay. So, first half is simple. What about all the food in the pot? So there's all sorts of stuff in the pot. You know, they will throw in different sorts of tavlin and things like this. And basically, once it's given off its taste, it's like grass sitting in the pot. It's not really doing anything over there. It's not terribly edible. It was put in there to give taste to the pot, but it's still hanging around. Can you use this stuff too? Okay, so the nevela fell into the pot again, Nebuch. So all food which is in the pot counts as shishim. And includes all the liquid. And even pselis, because there's stuff coming off of this food. Like I mentioned, you put in dill. Okay, somebody uses dill in cooking. So once the dill is cooked and the taste came out of it, it's just messing up the pot. There's nothing to eat there, but nevertheless, it's some start of shishim because the taste of it available go into that too. And here we have in the Mepharshim interesting din about when you have a pot. So everything in the pot is considered to be one unit. You cover the pot. We have over here, let's say a case where you're doing steaming. So you have steamers where it's a two-part keli. So you have the bottom part over here. You have this pot over here, which is a regular pot. And then you have a pot that sits on top of that pot, and it's got holes in the bottom. And then you put a cover on top. So you can put a liquid over here on the bottom. And this, it cooks it with steam. So there's steamed vegetables. And many people would say that you should steam your vegetables rather than boil your vegetables, because then you don't lose the nutrition, so much of the nutritional value into the liquid, because the steam is going to come in there and it's just going to be a minimal amount of the nutrients that are going to be lost. So it's better to cook it like this. This is couscous. These are those that cook couscous like this. That's Father Shemaichel. And so let's say they're going to put I don't know, they put some soup in the bottom. They wanted this couscous to taste like chicken soup. Okay, so they put some chicken soup on the bottom, and they're boiling up the chicken soup on the bottom. They take the couscous on the top, they put it over there, they put the cover on top. The steam comes up, and steaming the couscous, and life is good. But then you find out the life is not so good because some of the chicken that was put inside that soup is nevela. So now the shaila is, what can we use to be mavatal this nevela? Okay, so the pots are out of the picture. We're not using any keli. Everything that's in the bottom pot, for sure, is okay. We just learned all the food that's there is okay. What about being mitzdaref the couscous? So on the one hand, hey, wait a second. The couscous is absorbing taste, but it's not sitting there together with the soup on the bottom. It's in a separate keli. So maybe it shouldn't count. But on the other hand, it's covered. So it's b'etzem all one pot. And the steam is carrying the taste from top to the bottom, from the bottom to the top. It's all going back and forth. So why is it any worse than if it would be in one pot? There's a floor. Yeah, but the floor has holes in it and the steam's getting through. And we know from Hilchos Basar B'Cholov that the steam that comes off of the food has the same din as the food itself. When we had the whole discussion over there about Zayah. So what's the din? So we say, even if the food is in the air cavity of the pot, the steam, and it's being cooked to the steam that's coming up from the bottom kelim, it's from the shishim. You can count the couscous on top, or the vegetables, whatever it is, can be part of the shishim, even if it's not sitting in the bottom. So chiddush din. It also counts as part of the shishim. Now, we have another issue. So let's imagine, okay, let's take a simple case first. Here we have a nevela that fell into a pot of boiling water. Okay? And we have bittul b'shishim. That's why we see a big 60 on this pot. We have bittul b'shishim. Okay, so throw out the nevela, and the rest of the soup you're allowed to have because you have bittul b'shishim. We don't have any tam nevela over here, because you got 60 times more whatever there is in the pot against this piece of nevela. Okay, everything's fine. Let's say, for argument's sake, some of that water spilled out before you got rid of the nevela. Let's say half of this spilled out. What's going to be with the water? Asar mutter. You don't have shishim anymore. What's going to be the din? Hola. No?
Asr.
Asar. You don't have bittul b'shishim. This nevela keeps giving off time, so there's no there's no bittul b'shishim. Okay, fine. Let's say it boiled out. You left the cover off, and it boiled out. It didn't spill out. It boiled out. What would be the din? Or the same thing? Yeah. Or can we say, just like the liquid is decreasing in size, so to the nevela is decreasing in size. Maybe they're decreasing proportionately. And especially, what's going to be if you didn't leave it uncovered? It was just cooking covered. And in the cooking process, the nevela got smaller. How are we going to judge shishim over here? Do you do it the way it was before? Do you do it the way it was after? Let's say somebody took a good look at this piece, and he says it became smaller, or he says, I know it stayed the same size, or he says, I know the liquid is the same height, or I know the liquid went down. What's going to be the din? Are we going to change this, or do we just judge it basher husham? At the end, somebody takes a look at it and says, wait a second, there's not as much liquid as there was before. So the person says, yeah, but maybe there's not as much nevela as there was before either. So how do we judge this? So this is the end of Sif Dalet. What do you do with this potential situation? Ma'adin. What's going to be the halacha in betchilas habishul? If when you started the cooking, are you shishim keneged ha'iser? There was shishim to nullify the nevela, the prohibition. Al basaf habishul. But at the end, you don't have shishim. Now, let's say it was covered. If it was covered, so where did the liquid go? It doesn't evaporate. And don't tell me it wasn't on tight and it got out. No, it was on tight. Where did it go? Maybe it went into the wall of the pot. Can we rely on this idea? Maybe some of the heter got absorbed in the pot. Pot ain't shishim. Now there's no shishim because we have this very porous, absorbent material to absorb it. So now the liquid went down, but where did it go? So the hypothesis is it went into the walls of the pot. Now we don't have shishim anymore. So what do we say? If we know that this liquid went into the walls of the pot, so now we're back to the discussion in Sif Aleph. Can you use the wall, especially in this case? We know where it is that this heter went. It went to the wall of the pot, so maybe you really do have shishim. What's going to be the din in the case? So the short answer to this question is no. No, this doesn't work. Halacha l'maisa, and everything comes out at the end. The Shach and Taz are not going to allow this, but there are other svaras that those that want to say. The Shulchan Aruch says as follows: if it's an Issa D'Oraisa, we're going to be machmer in this case. But if it's an Issa D'Rabbanan, says the Machaber, you can be mekel. Why is it? Why we'll be more mekel? Issa D'Rabbanan, there are shittas of Rishonim that all that this is okay. So therefore, an Issa D'Rabbanan and the Machaber is all right. So therefore, when is this going to be an Issa D'Oraisa? When it's Min B'Shein Meaning. Okay, if you remember back at the beginning at Tzadik Ches, we differentiated. What's the difference between bittul? How much bittul you need if it's min b'shein and mine? Things would have two different tastes. So then we need shishim. Eis and tam midiraisa, tam keke diraisa. So it's not going to be a kosher unless you have a bittul b'shishim. If it's min b'minei, the midiraisa, it's batal b'reiv. Majority rules. The Rabbanim were guys you need shisha. Okay, so therefore the Shulchan Aruch says that if it's a case which is midiraisa, which is the case of min bein and minei, so then you have to answer it. But if it's a case of min b'minei and you have reiv, so then midiraisa it's okay. So then the Machaber wants to say it's all right. But the Shachan Tazdon, they call it the Marshal. You're not being mitzaref this kedera under any conditions. We we don't allow, and you don't use the kedera for anything. Regardless of whether it's min b'minei, min b'she'ein minei, we prohibit the tafshil. Tafshil is ada, but if the cover wasn't on and it just boiled out, so then there's no machlekes at all. Everybody holds it also. You can't use the part that evaporated out. What are you going to do? You can take the steam that evaporated into the room and use it to be mavatal the nevela. Why? How? It doesn't make any sense. The only svara we have, since we did have days that said they got absorbed into the pot, then you could use that. Okay, so this is the Rabbanim, the Machaber wants to be mekel and wants to allow it. There's a prima gonim that gives some sinus mokum to this whole idea. And again, it's difficult for us to understand. You learn Mishnayos. Take an example, Mishnah Mikvois talks about taking an empty keli and you put it in the mikveh, and the kelim absorb through the outer wall, absorb the liquid from the mikveh. So you have this idea of the whole thing filling up. So we'll learn Machaber inside, and this is Sif Dalit. So this is just the learning inside the whole explanation we just had. Masharim, what can you use? So the first part of this Machaber was easy. What do you use from the pot? And the answer is everything. Masharim bereitev, you can use the liquid, or bekipa. The kifa, what's the kifa? Pirush hadak dak shel basar b'tavlin misaseh b'shuli akadera. Is all the thin leftover pieces of meat and spices. And all the pieces, all the food in the pot. And we make our measurements according to what we see at the end. Right now, so you measure the is and the heter the way it is before you. And even if the heter was more before, this is the shita of the Machaber, that even though the heter, in the example we brought before, the soup was at a higher level, but now as a result of the cooking, it became less. And why? Not because you left the cover off and it evaporated into the air. If the pot cover was on, it got absorbed into the gedera, then it's okay. No, excuse me. This is talking about Meshainamina. That even though it went down and you want to say V'nivla Pegadeta, yeah. Nevertheless, we judge Kamesha Bola Faneno. We judge the way it is now, and you cannot be mitzdaref with what was absorbed in the Kedera. Read again from the beginning. We have to judge the way it is now, and now it's not Poto Bashishim. Even though you can make the argument that since it was more before, and now the reason it's less, because the taste got absorbed into the wall of the pot, we cannot be mitzdaref. You can't use water absorbed in the wall of the pot. There's a shit of Machaber that since it's an Issa Derais member Shana Mina, so that you cannot be mitzdaref what was absorbed in the walls of the pot. But if it's min b'minai, then you have midirais, it's batal b'reiv. We're dealing with this in the Rabbanan, and there are those that say, "B'chal, this is okay." So then you'll be mitzdaref, says the Machaber. Meshar and gam b'meshabolak data. You can utilize this which was absorbed in the walls of the pot. Right now, it's still in the walls of the pot. How are you going to figure it out? Do your best you can. Make a proper calculation and consider it like this whole piece of metal is like a piece of heter. But this that evaporated into the air as a result of the fire, you can't count that. That disappeared. It completely doesn't exist anymore. And it went into the ozone layer or wherever it is it went. Okay, so this was a bit of an exercise. So next week, wish everybody a Freilich Chanukah. So we're not going to be having a shiur next Wednesday, so you can use the time for Chazara. Those of you that are going to be taking a written component, I will going to send this out before Shabbos, and you'll have the week after Hanukkah to do it too. So you have the week of Hanukkah if you want, but I know Shluchim are busy Hanukkah. So you have the week after that to do it. So you have 2 weeks to do it. Send it out before Shabbos. But in the meantime, it's good to get this straight, get Chazara, and then we go to the rest of Tzaddik Tes, very, very relevant dinim, and so on, and that we will learn Be'ezus Hashem Yisborech 2 weeks from now. Okay?
Yeah, shukach.
Okay, Kol Tuv.